Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive.
Always exciting to jump into a new topic.
And today we're really tackling something that I think a lot of us experience every day.
Oh, yeah.
And that's all the stuff that just doesn't work with company structures and practices.
Like, what do we have to do to shake things up a little bit?
Exactly. And especially those old school ideas around leadership
Yeah,
and communication.
definitely. Those things could use some work.
And luckily for us, we have a really good guide for this deep dive, and that's Kim Scott's book, Radical Candor.
I love this book.
It's been a while since it's come out, but it's really making waves, I think, in the management world.
Yeah, and for good reason.
I mean, she's really advocating for something very different than the traditional corporate approach.
For sure, it's a completely different way of thinking about feedback and communication.
And what I love about it is that it really boils down to this core idea.
You're talking about radical candor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about being direct and honest,
Right.
but also making sure that you're conveying that you care.
Yeah, you have to care personally
Yeah.
and challenge directly. That's the whole point.
That's it. It's that beautiful balance.
Yeah.
So one of the things that Kim Scott really challenges is this idea of the just professional approach.
Oh my gosh, yes. That whole keeping things purely transactional.
Right.
Like, we're just robots.
Like you leave your personal life at the door
Exactly. No personal connections whatsoever.
and just focus on the task at hand.
Yeah, and she argues that actually kills trust.
Absolutely.
And it really hinders creativity.
And it makes you think about all the places that you've worked.
Yeah. Have you ever felt like just another cog in the machine?
Oh, gosh, all the time.
Just like a number.
Yeah, just a name on a spreadsheet.
And that your manager doesn't really see you as a person,
Right,
just as you know someone to manage another employee.
right, exactly. And Scott argues that this is a recipe for disaster.
Oh, it's terrible for team morale.
Yeah,
And it just leads to disengagement.
yeah. And she has this great example from her own experience.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about that one.
Where she tried to motivate a team of diamond cutters in Moscow
Okay.
with just US dollars.
So just throwing money if the problem.
She thought that would be enough.
Right. Like that's the ultimate motivator.
Right, because, money talks.
Yeah.
But she quickly realized that to really motivate them,
Uh-huh.
she had to understand their personal lives.
Oh, so it's about more than just money.
So much more.
It's about connecting with them.
Yeah, their dreams, their families,
Yeah.
their aspirations.
It's about seeing them as human beings.
It is.
Not just workers.
Yeah. And I think that's such a powerful lesson for any leader.
No, absolutely.
That you can't just assume that everyone's motivated by the same thing.
Exactly. You have to get to know your team on a personal level
You have to understand what makes them tick.
and what their goals are.
What are those things outside of work?
Yeah, what are they striving for?
Right. And I think that's something that gets lost in a lot of corporate environments.
For sure.
So how do we move beyond that just professional approach?
Right. How do we actually build those connections?
And that's where I think Radical Candor really shines.
How does she tackle that?
She tackles another big challenge, which is the fear of giving and receiving criticism.
Ah, that age-old problem.
Right, because we're all, from childhood.
Yeah, don't hurt anyone's feelings.
Be nice.
Don't criticize.
Right. But she argues that actually this is holding us back.
Yeah, it's what she calls ruinous empathy.
Yes.
You're so afraid to upset someone
Right.
that you avoid giving them the feedback they need.
And then in the long run, it's not helpful.
Not at all.
And she tells this great story about Sheryl Sandberg giving her feedback
Okay.
on her use of during a presentation.
Oh, I remember that one. It's a good one.
And Sandberg didn't sugarcoat it at all.
She was very direct.
Very direct and specific
Yeah.
about what needed to improve.
Right.
But she did it with this clear sense of care.
So it wasn't just mean.
Yeah.
It was coming from a good place.
It was coming from a place of wanting to help Scott get better.
And to help her grow.
Yes.
That's what makes it radical candor.
Exactly. It's that combination of honesty and helpfulness.
Right. It's that sweet spot
Yeah.
between being too harsh and too afraid to say anything.
Yes. And she breaks down feedback into these 4 quadrants,
Oh, yeah, the 4 quadrants.
which are radical candor,
Obnoxious aggression
ruinous empathy,
and manipulative insincerity.
and I find it so helpful to kind of visualize.
Oh, yeah.
Where does my feedback fall?
Which quadrant are you in?
Am I being too aggressive?
Right.
Or am I being too empathetic?
And not actually saying anything useful.
Or am I being manipulative?
Right. It's a really helpful framework.
And think about your own experiences.
Okay.
Have you ever been on the receiving end of feedback
Uh-huh.
that was either brutal and unhelpful
Like just tearing you down.
or so vague
Yeah, like you didn't really learn anything from it.
and insincere that it was basically useless?
Right. Like, oh, good job.
Exactly.
Doesn't really help.
Or maybe you struggled to give feedback, worried about hurting someone's feelings.
I think we've all been there.
Yeah, I know I have. And it's tough to find that
That's
balance.
for sure. It's a delicate balance.
But this framework really gives you a way to kind of assess,
Yeah.
okay, where am I falling on this spectrum?
And what do I need to adjust?
Yeah, and one of my favorite anecdotes from the book
Tell me about it.
is about this dog owner who told her this phrase.
Okay.
It's not mean, it's
No.
clear.
I love that one.
And I think that's such a good way to think about radical candor.
Yeah.
Sometimes being direct is the kindest and most helpful thing you can do.
It's true. Sometimes we need to hear the hard truth.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing that avoiding those difficult conversations
Yeah.
doesn't help anyone.
It just makes things worse in the long run.
So it's about creating that culture where feedback is seen as a gift.
A gift.
It's an opportunity to learn and grow,
Yeah, not something to be feared.
both individually and as a team.
And she talks about growth in another way, too.
Right. She talks about this obsession with promotions.
Oh, yeah, like everyone needs to be climbing the ladder.
Like that's the only way to succeed.
Yeah, but she challenges that assumption.
She does, and she introduces this really interesting framework,
I'm curious. Tell me about it.
which is the rock star and the superstar.
Okay, interesting.
And what's so fascinating about this framework is it recognizes that not everyone thrives on that upward trajectory.
Not everyone wants to be a manager.
Right, and some people, the rock stars,
Okay.
find fulfillment in stability and mastery of their current role.
They're happy where they are.
They're happy. They might not be seeking that next promotion,
Right.
but they are essential to the team's
Yeah,
success.
absolutely. Those are your solid performers.
They're the backbone
Yeah.
of the organization.
Right.
And then you have the superstars
Okay.
who are driven by rapid growth
Yeah.
and are always looking for the next big challenge.
So those are your go-getters.
Yes. And the point is, both types of individuals are valuable.
I agree. You need both.
And companies need both to function effectively.
Absolutely.
And forcing everyone onto that superstar track
Uh-huh.
can actually be detrimental.
It can lead to burnout.
Yeah, the classic Peter principle.
Oh, yeah. Promoting people beyond their competence.
Right. And it just creates this unnecessary competition and anxiety.
Right. Everyone's trying to climb over each other.
And she even shares this really personal story
Oh, yeah. What's that?
about how her own priorities shifted when she was pregnant with twins
Okay.
and her focus changed.
Yeah.
And she wasn't seeking the same level of professional advancement anymore.
It's a good reminder that life is about more than just work.
It is. And it's about recognizing that our priorities can change
Absolutely.
over time.
And that's okay.
Yeah. And she also talks about how her son's fever broke while watching the Lorax.
Oh, that's a funny one. I love that story.
And it led her to this realization that this obsession with constantly biggering, as the Lorax puts it,
Yeah.
wasn't necessarily the best approach.
To life or work.
Right. And it's about finding fulfillment in different ways.
Exactly. And that's an important question for you to consider, too.
Yes.
What are your aspirations?
What kind of growth are you looking for in your career?
Do you want to climb the ladder?
Or do you want to stay put?
Or maybe something else entirely?
Right. Understanding your own motivations is key to finding fulfillment in your work
Couldn't agree more. It's about knowing yourself.
and knowing what makes you happy.
Exactly.
So I think that's a great place to pause for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds good. We'll pick up next time with more challenges to the status quo from Radical Candor.
Looking forward to it.
Me too. And we'll dive into some more specific techniques and frameworks that you can use to create a more radically candid culture in your own workplace.
Awesome. See you next time.
See you then.
Yeah, it really does challenge that whole idea that everyone's just striving for that corner office.
Right.
Sometimes it's about finding different paths to growth, you know?
Absolutely.
Whether that's mastering a particular skill or, taking on a new project or contributing to something bigger than themselves.
Yeah. And that brings us to another challenge that Scott tackles, which is unilateral authority,
Oh, yeah, that top-down approach.
where the manager has all the power.
Right. The classic command and control style.
But everyone else just follows orders.
Not very effective.
Not at all. And she uses Google as an example
Okay.
where they deliberately limited managerial power.
Interesting. So how did they do that?
Well, they implemented specific processes
Okay.
for things like hiring and promotions
Uh,
and performance reviews
okay.
that emphasized checks and balances.
So it wasn't just the manager making all the decisions.
Exactly. The idea was to reduce bias
Makes sense.
and empower individuals.
Rather than giving managers excessive control.
Right. So, for instance, managers couldn't just promote someone on a whim.
Oh, interesting.
There was a whole committee involved in the decision-making process.
Wow. So a much more collaborative approach.
Much more collaborative. And it reminds me of that anecdote she shares about Steve Jobs,
Oh, yeah.
who, despite his very strong personality,
Yeah.
was always open to being challenged and even proven wrong.
I think that's a really important quality for any leader.
I agree. It's about being humble
Right.
and recognizing that you don't have all the answers.
And that other people might have valuable insight.
Exactly. And when you create that culture
Yeah.
where everyone feels empowered to contribute their ideas and challenge the status quo,
Right.
you're more likely to get diverse perspectives and make better decisions.
Absolutely. It's about harnessing the collective intelligence of the team.
Right. And it makes you think about your own experiences, right?
Yeah.
Have you ever worked in an environment where you felt like you couldn't speak up?
Oh, gosh, yeah. Where your ideas weren't valued.
Or you were afraid to challenge the boss?
It can be really stifling.
It is. And that kind of environment can really stifle creativity and innovation.
Absolutely. People are afraid to take risks.
Yeah.
Or to think outside the box.
And it's the opposite of what Scott advocates for in Radical Candor.
So how do we create that culture of openness and collaboration?
Where everyone feels valued and empowered.
That's the million-dollar question.
And I think a big part of it is what Scott emphasizes, which is building real human relationships in the workplace.
So it's not just about the work.
It's not about the people.
It's about connecting with people on a deeper level.
Yeah, like actually getting to know your colleagues.
Yes, and going beyond those superficial interactions.
Right, like those water cooler conversations.
And actually taking the time to understand who they are.
As people.
As people, what their values are.
Interests.
Their dreams.
Yeah, their hopes and fears.
And recognizing that everyone brings something unique to the table.
Absolutely.
And that diversity of thought and experience is a strength, not a weakness.
It's what makes teams stronger.
Exactly. And she talks about the importance of staying centered,
Okay.
building relationships through social interactions, and demonstrating openness and respect for different values.
So it's about creating a welcoming and inclusive environment. Yes, and she even shares her personal recipe for staying centered.
Oh, I'm curious. Tell me more.
Which includes things like getting enough sleep.
The basics.
The basics, exercising,
Right.
having family meals.
Things that are easy to forget.
So easy to forget when we're caught up in the hustle and bustle of work.
Yeah, we neglect our own well-being.
We do.
And it's a good reminder that we're not robots. We're human beings.
With lives and needs outside of work.
And when we take care of ourselves,
Yes.
we're better equipped to show up for others.
Absolutely. And be present in our interactions with them.
So it's not selfish to prioritize self-care.
It's not. It's actually essential for being a good leader and colleague.
I love that perspective.
And she also highlights the importance of genuine social interactions at work.
Okay.
And it's not about those forced fun activities like, holiday parties.
Always, this can be awkward.
Or team building exercises.
Or you're like, oh my gosh, you have to do this.
But it's about creating opportunities for people to connect on a personal level.
So, what are some examples?
Well, she gives the example of Dick Costolo,
Okay.
Twitter's former CEO,
Right.
who made a conscious effort to eliminate you guys from his vocabulary.
Oh, interesting. Why did he do that?
To be more inclusive.
Oh, that's a good point.
And it seems like such a small thing,
Yeah.
but it sends a powerful message
Absolutely. It shows that you're paying attention.
about creating a welcoming and respectful environment.
And that you value everyone's contributions.
Exactly. And it's those small, everyday actions that can make a big difference in shaping company culture.
I agree. It's the little things that add up.
And she also tells this great story about Bill Campbell,
Oh, yeah. I love Bill Campbell.
who was a legendary Silicon Valley coach.
And
And he was a big believer in hugging.
hugging.
And he believed that physical touch,
Okay.
when appropriate, obviously,
Right. You have to be mindful of boundaries.
could be a powerful way to show care and support.
So it's about more than just words.
Yes, it's about those nonverbal cues.
The power of touch.
And it highlights how physical space and touch can play a role in building connections.
Yeah, it's interesting because we often think of work as this purely professional space
Right.
where you leave your emotions at the door
Where you're just a cog in the machine.
and you don't bring your personal life into it.
But Scott argues that actually bringing our whole selves to work,
Okay.
including our vulnerability and our capacity for empathy.
That's a radical idea.
It is. But she says that's what makes us better leaders and colleagues.
So it's about embracing our humanity
It is.
and bringing that to work.
And recognizing that we're all human beings
Yeah. With all our flaws and imperfections.
with complex lives and emotions.
And that's okay.
It is. And when we create a workplace where people feel safe to be themselves,
Right.
to express their ideas, and to connect with each other on a human level.
Yeah.
That's when the magic happens.
That's when you get real innovation and creativity.
Exactly. And so we've talked about the importance of challenging the status quo
Right.
when it comes to leadership and communication.
But how do we actually put these ideas into practice?
Yeah, how do we create a culture of radical candor in our own workplaces?
That's the challenge.
It is, and Scott dives into a lot of specific techniques and frameworks.
Okay, I'm all ears. And one that really stands out to me is this idea of impromptu guidance.
Oh, yeah. Giving feedback in the moment.
Right, while it's still fresh in everyone's minds.
Yeah, instead of saving it up for,
Like those dreaded annual performance reviews.
Exactly.
Which nobody likes.
Nobody likes them, and they're often not very effective.
Right, because so much time has passed.
So much has happened.
You can't even remember what you're supposed to be giving feedback on.
Right, and it feels so formal and stilted.
Yeah, it's not a natural way to have a conversation.
And so she suggests having those quick 2 to 3 minute conversations.
Okay.
Right after a meeting or even just passing someone in the hallway.
So just kind of in the flow of work?
Yes. It's much more manageable than those formal sit-downs.
Right. It doesn't feel as intimidating.
And it allows for more frequent and timely feedback.
So you can address things as they come up.
Exactly. And she emphasizes the importance of being humble when giving criticism.
Okay.
It's not about being right or proving someone
That's
wrong.
helping them grow.
Yeah, and she even suggests this simple language tweak,
Oh, what's that?
saying that's wrong instead of you're wrong.
Interesting. I like that.
It's subtle, but it makes a difference.
It takes the focus off of the person
Yes.
and puts it on the behavior.
It's about separating the person from the behavior.
Right. We all make mistakes.
We do. And
Right.
feedback is more effective when it's focused on, specific actions or outcomes.
Right, rather than attacking someone's character.
Exactly. And she also encourages people to gauge the guidance.
Gauge the guidance. What does that mean?
So it means to be mindful of how much praise versus criticism you're giving.
Okay, so finding that right balance.
Right. And to pay attention to how your feedback is landing with others.
So, are people actually hearing you?
Are they getting defensive?
Are they becoming more open to feedback?
Yeah. It's about being self-aware and adjusting your approach
Okay.
based on the individual and the situation.
So there's no one-size-fits-all approach.
Not at all. And one of the most intriguing ideas in the book
Tell me about it.
is this concept of whoops the monkey.
Whoops the monkey. I love that name.
It's basically a stuffed monkey
Okay.
that gets passed around at team meetings,
Uh-huh.
and whoever has it has to share a mistake they made that week.
Oh, that's a fun idea.
And it sounds a little silly,
Yeah.
but it's actually a brilliant way to normalize making mistakes.
So it's about taking the shame out of failure.
Exactly, and creating a culture where failure is seen as a learning opportunity.
Right. Not something to be feared.
It helps to break down that fear of failure, which can be a major obstacle
Yeah, for
to
change.
innovation and creativity.
Absolutely. When people are afraid to fail, they don't take risks.
Right, and when people feel safe to experiment
Yeah.
and take risks, they're more likely to come up with new ideas and push the boundaries of what's possible.
That's how breakthroughs happen.
It is, and she also talks about the importance of career conversations,
Okay, what are those?
which are more in-depth discussions
Mm-hmm.
about each individual's aspirations and growth trajectory.
So it's not just about their current performance.
No, it goes beyond the typical performance review
Okay.
and delves into what truly motivates each person.
Right. What are their long-term goals?
What are their dreams?
How do they see their career unfolding?
And she suggests asking open-ended questions like,
Okay.
starting with kindergarten, tell me about your life.
Wow, that's a big question.
It's about getting to know the person behind the job title,
I like that.
understanding their values, their passions, their dreams.
And it's not just about promotions.
Not at all. It's about helping people find fulfillment in their work
Whether that's through mastery of a skill
or taking on new challenges.
or contributing to a larger purpose.
Yeah, and recognizing that career paths are not always linear
Right.
and that success can be defined in many different ways.
Absolutely. And she also offers some practical advice on hiring and firing.
Oh, yeah, those are always tough topics.
That's an important ones to address.
And she emphasizes the importance of being deliberate and thoughtful in both processes.
So it's not about making rash decisions.
No, it's about really taking the time to consider all the factors involved.
And to be fair and transparent throughout the process.
Yes, and she stresses the importance of minimizing bias in hiring,
Oh, yeah, that's crucial.
defining team fit as rigorously as skills.
So it's not just about whether someone has the technical ability.
Right. It's also about whether they're a good cultural fit for the team.
And she talks about using blind skills assessments.
Yes, to weed out false positives and negatives.
So you're not just relying on gut feeling.
Right. You're using data to make more informed decisions.
And she has this great saying about hiring.
What's that?
If you're not dying to hire someone, don't make an offer.
I love that.
It's about being really selective.
And ensuring that every new hire is a great fit, both for the role
and for the team culture.
Yes. And she also acknowledges that firing people is never easy.
Of course not. It's one of the hardest things a manager has to do.
But she emphasizes the importance of not waiting too long.
So don't let things fester.
And of making the decision collaboratively with input from your boss in HR.
So it's not just a unilateral decision.
Right. It's a team effort.
And she talks about being fair, transparent, and humane in the process.
Yes. While also recognizing that sometimes letting someone go is the best thing, both for them and for the company.
Sometimes it's the kindest thing you can do.
It is. And it's about helping them find a better fit somewhere else.
Right, where their skills and talents will be more appreciated.
So it's not just about cutting ties, it's about supporting them in their transition.
Exactly. And she also provides a lot of tips for running effective meetings.
Oh yeah, meetings can be such a time suck.
If they're not done well.
Right. And she's a big advocate for meeting-free zones.
Meeting-free zones? What are those?
It's basically dedicated time blocks.
Okay.
Where people are not allowed to schedule meetings.
So they can actually focus on their work.
Yes, it's about giving people that uninterrupted time to think and create.
I love that idea.
And it's about being mindful of how meetings can eat into productivity.
Yeah, they can be a real drain on time and energy.
And ensuring that every gathering has a clear purpose and agenda.
So you're not just meeting for the sake of meeting.
Right, there needs to be a clear outcome.
And she also emphasizes the importance of walking around. And connecting with people outside of formal meetings.
Yes, she tells this great story about Dick Costello, who would regularly stroll through the Twitter offices.
Okay.
Chatting with employees, getting a feel for the company culture.
So it's about being present and accessible.
Yes, and making an effort to connect with people on a personal level.
Even if it's just for a few minutes.
Right, and it's those informal interactions
Uh-huh.
that can often be the most meaningful.
And she talks about being mindful of company culture.
Yes, and how even small decisions can have a big impact.
So it's about paying attention to the details.
And recognizing that culture is not just something that happens.
It's something that's actively shaped by the actions and decisions of everyone in the company.
Exactly, and she shares this story about receiving a thoughtfully organized folder when she started working at Apple, and how that simple gesture communicated so much about the company's attention to detail and design.
That's a great example.
It's about paying attention to those little things.
Right, the things that might seem insignificant.
And recognizing that every interaction, no matter how small, can contribute to the overall culture of the company.
Absolutely. It's about creating an environment where people feel valued and respected.
Yes, and that ultimately leads to better work and a more fulfilling experience for everyone.
Couldn't agree more. It's about creating a workplace where people thrive.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into radical candor, I think the key takeaway is this challenging the status quo, especially when it comes to leadership and communication, can be incredibly rewarding.
It can lead to amazing results.
It's about having the courage to question those old assumptions.
To experiment with new approaches.
And to create a work environment where people feel valued, respected, and empowered to do their best work.
Exactly. It's about creating a more human-centered workplace.
And Kim Scott's book provides a ton of insightful advice and practical frameworks.
It's a great resource.
But ultimately, it's up to each of us to apply those principles in our own unique ways.
So what resonates with you?
What challenges do you see in your own workplace?
And what steps can you take to start creating a more radically candid culture?
And here's a final thought to ponder.
Okay, I'm listening.
Scott argues that those traditional performance reviews, the ones we all dread, can be deeply flawed.
They often are.
And she suggests alternative methods for feedback and recognition.
Like what?
Things like killer whale and whoops the monkey.
Okay, those sound interesting.
Which focus on more immediate and informal feedback.
So it's about giving feedback in the moment.
Yeah, and making it a more regular part of the work process.
It definitely makes you rethink those old systems.
It does. It begs the question, could ditching those formal reviews and embracing a more open, continuous feedback loop be the key to unlocking a more honest and supportive work environment?
That's a great question to leave our listeners with.
It is something to think about.
Food for thought.
So thanks for joining us for another deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you found this exploration of radical candor insightful and thought-provoking.
As always.
And we'll see you next time for more fascinating deep dives into the ideas that are shaping our world.
See you then.